It's a little early to make a steak, but the first thing I do when I get home, I'm gonna go make this steak. So the first thing you want to do to make your steak is you want to season your steak before you start the marinade, because you want that salt to kind of set in and into the steak. It'll bring the flavor of the steak out before the marinade kind of overtakes it. And so, how many of y'all in here would say you're good at cooking? Good cooks? Okay, good. So, I start with kosher salt. It's like the best to start on a steak, and I'll do that on both sides, because that's what brings the flavor out, is the salt. And then we'll get to the marinade. So, since the marinade will take a while, I'm gonna get into why you should listen to me and why I'm credible, right? So, from a really young age, as long as I can remember, I've always loved to cook. My family, of course, always would make meals for me, but when I was younger, I always liked to take it into my own hands, and I would like to play around with the recipes and see what I can do to make it better and stuff. And so ever since then, I've had a long history of obviously a lot of mistakes, and I've made meals for my family, and I made meals for Thanksgiving. Some of them have been good, and some of them have been pretty bad. So cooking's all about learning from your mistakes and seeing what you've done wrong and kind of switching that up. And at first, it's definitely better to start by getting measurements and knowing the correct portions to put in to a marinade specifically. But as time goes on and you start to make more and more, you kind of understand that. So for me, I don't really have to measure it out. But specifically things like soy sauce, or I'm not even going to try to say this, this is the stuff that you want to definitely measure out, because it'll completely take the flavor out. The other day I made a few. I totally used this as an excuse to make steaks the past 3 nights, and so I did a little too much soy sauce in it. It was just so salty, so then I had to redo that, and yeah, I think I perfected it, I'm pretty sure. And so I didn't put it on note cards, because I figured note cards are going to get lost in your car or thrown into your book bag, so I'll put it onto canvas. So the first thing is I'm going to start with this Worcestershire sauce, right? So usually you'll do a half cup of this and then a half cup of soy sauce, but that's way too much salt for me. It's too strong for me. So I'll put about half of that in there, and that'll be the base. And then I'm going to do the other half of soy sauce. Alright, and here's my secret, and I'll tell many people about this. Honey is the best in any steak marinade. That's what gives it a nice crispy exterior. That's what makes it real. It gives it a little crunch, and it kind of sears it right, but it also just kind of sweetens it up a lot. Usually you can do about 2 tablespoons worth if you want to know the measurement of that. So I'm going to measure out 2 tablespoons worth of honey, and that's usually a safe amount, because I don't think you can ever do too much honey, honestly. It's so good in a steak. Okay, so then we got that. And another big secret, which isn't a secret, is minced garlic. This should go in almost every steak. This is just universally such a good ingredient. I'll usually do 2 or 3 teaspoons worth of minced garlic. And you can be generous with the first scoop. Okay. And then next, Dijon mustard is also really good. So I'll do 2 tablespoons worth of that. here are your seasonings that you can either decide if you want to put it onto the steak first or if you want to put it into the marinade. But usually I'll put it into the marinade, and I like it a lot better that way. And since I've been at it for a while, I usually can just like do what I like and just like put my special amount, like what I think is right. But in the recipe, I'll give like a certain amount that you can put into that. Honestly, cooking is just like knowing the things that you like to make like one thing that you love. And so this isn't a marinade that you'd find online. It's just a mix of multiple marinades that I've made over the years, and it all just comes together to make the one thing that I find personally the best. And so I also forgot to put ground black pepper on the steak. Super important. Steak is like always meant to be put with salt and pepper. That should be like the first things you always put on a steak. It's always just going to bring that flavor out. Alright, and then once you get all your ingredients in, I love to use this thing. And I'll just mix it around. It has a hard time at first with the honey, but once you start mixing it, it comes together real nice. And it really froths it. The milk frother really brings it all together and just makes it like one marinade. And olive oil is also another option that you can use to make it a little bit juicier for the marinade and make it more of a liquid. This one's a little bit thicker, so whenever I'll take it out of the bag later, most of the marinade will stay onto the steak, and then I'll cook it like with it on it. But most people don't like the taste of a marinade to overpower their flavor of the steak. So now I'll put it into the bag, I'll pour it in. I try and get as much air out as I can in here. I'll mix it around a little. And for a steak, you'll usually not want it to sit for way too long because it really soaks up the marinade. I yesterday made one and I let it sit for 4 hours and it was the only thing you could taste. And I love the taste of a steak. Like if you go to a nice steakhouse, it's all just that pure steak flavor and they don't really marinate too much. But so usually like 45 minutes is a sweet spot for a steak. But if you were gonna marinate chicken, then that usually you can leave for like 24 hours and really let that soak in. Especially with like Italian seasonings, that's a lot better. Also just finding what kind of seasoning you like is just trial and error. And you just have to really work and find what the best things that you personally prefer are. And like I said earlier, it's just putting the things that you like and to make one thing that you love. And with that concept, I challenge everyone to go out and like play around with that. And don't be scared to mess up. Like if you make a bad meal, it's just part of it and you learn from it and you get better and better. And that's where like the love of cooking starts to come in. It's whenever you see your progress over time and you make stuff that's really good. So.